This video is going to cover questions 1 through 6 in the review. First one, a recent research study randomly assigned participants into groups that were given either aspirin or placebo. The research study followed the participants for 12 years to see which ones had strokes. And the question asks, what is the primary purpose of random assignment for making inferences based on the study? Now, although it is true that randomly assigning people is, partly related to not letting people know whether they're getting placebo, but not the primary purpose. The primary purpose really is to ensure that groups are similar in all respects, except for whether they took aspirin or placebo, so that cause and effect conclusions can be made. And it is not true at all that this would ensure that the participants are representative of the population. Only a random sample selected randomly from the population would do that. And random assignment is different from a random sample, remember. Question 2. A website invited its visitors to voice their support or opposition for Obamacare. Over 2,000 people responded and 73% opposed Obamacare. The website announced that the majority of all Americans oppose Obamacare. We want to select the answer that is most valid based on the way the data is collected, but whether the announcement is valid or invalid. So first of all, when I look at this, I say the website announced the majority of all Americans. These are people who visited a website to voice their support, so that's not necessarily likely to be representative of all Americans, so not a random sample. So right away I'm thinking this is invalid, and there are two possibilities for invalid. Invalid because the sample is too small, given the size of the population, to be unbiased. That one is not true, because remember, the sample size actually has nothing to do with whether the method of choosing the sample is biased or not. Random samples are unbiased no matter how large or small the samples are. The problem with having a small sample is that you lack precision. The margin of error would be very big. The correct answer here is that this is an invalid inference because the sample is not likely to be representative of the whole U.S. population. So there's our correct answer. For question 3, researchers surveyed 1,000 randomly selected adults in the United States and asked them to report their income and the number of containers they typically recycle in a week. A strong, positive, statistically significant correlation was found between income and the number of containers people recycle in a week. I want to know, can researchers conclude that earning more money causes more recycling among U.S. adults? Here, the key to remember is that if we want to make a cause and effect conclusion, we would need an experiment with random assignment to treatment groups. And here, people's wealth, as our sort of explanatory variable, is not something that's randomly assigned. This is an observational study and does not allow cause and effect conclusions to be made. So there's question 3. For question 4, a researcher investigated the impact of a particular herbicide on fish. He randomly assigned 60 healthy fish to either be exposed or not be exposed to the herbicide, with 30 fish in each group. The fish exposed to the herbicide showed higher levels of an enzyme that was associated with cancer, but the difference was determined not to be statistically significant. So, true or false, the research results demonstrated strong evidence that the herbicide does not cause higher levels of the enzyme. And this is a false statement. Remember, if we were doing our hypothesis, our null hypothesis here would be that there's no difference in the enzyme levels between the two, herbicide and the no herbicide. And the alternative is that there is a difference. Here we failed to reject the null hypothesis, we've failed to reject the null hypothesis, But remember that when we fail to reject the null hypothesis, that is not the same thing as saying that the null hypothesis is true. Just as when we fail to find a defendant guilty, it's not the same thing as saying that they're necessarily innocent. It's just that the evidence isn't strong enough to be convincing in favor of the alternative. So this is a false statement. All we can say is that we haven't shown strong evidence that the herbicide does raise the enzyme level. We haven't shown that it doesn't change it. Question 5. What type of statistical test could be used to test for an association between immigrants' continent of origin, so that's a categorical variable with many categories, and whether or not they attend college, which again is another categorical variable. Since we have two categorical variables, but we've got more than two categories for one of them, we can't use a z-test. We can't use a t-test because we'd need a quantitative variable there, so we'd be working with means. And so the answer here that's correct is the chi-square test for association could be used in a situation when I've got two categorical variables, and in particular it's necessary when I've got a categorical variable that has at least three categories. Question 6. A telephone survey asked a random sample of 1,028 U.S. teens to name their favorite movie from 2012. Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 2 had the highest percentage, with 13% of teens in the sample ranking it as their favorite movie. We want to know which of the following is true. The first statement is that the population of interest is all U.S. teens. Now, since they took a random sample of U.S. teens, this is presumably the population that they were interested in. The next one is that 13% is a parameter. Here, 13% of teens in the sample ranked it, Breaking Dawn Part 2, as their favorite movie. So that's not a parameter. To be a parameter, we'd have to collect data from the entire population and use it to calculate a number. This is not true. 13% is a statistic, not a parameter. It's calculated from the sample. And this sampling design should provide a reasonably unbiased estimate of the true percentage of all U.S. teens who would rank this movie as their favorite of 2012. Because it was a random sample, it should be representative, so that should be true. So the correct answers would be 1 and 3. Okay. And we'll stop there and pick up with question 7 on the next video.